So hello everyone, my name is Zaijia and I'm a PhD student from the Management Department. Today, I'm very excited to present my work on cognitive, emotional, and visual responses to norm violations. Social norms are shared rules that guide people's own behaviors and their reactions to others' behavior. But not all the social norms are the same. Research from moral development and social psychology observe different patterns of thinking about social conventions than about matters of morality. While much research has investigated the distinctive conditions and correlates of compliance to these two kinds of rules, little research has studied how people react to others' norm violations. To fill this gap, the current research examines people's responses to violations of moral and conventional norms. In addition to comparing across these domains, we also look at how these reactions are predicted by internalization. Internalization is often defined as a process converting regulatory functions for norms from external contingencies to inner self-regulations. In self-determination theory, extrinsic motivation refers to drivers of behavior that originate outside of individuals, such as society's approval and rewards, whereas intrinsic motivation refers to drivers that originate inside of the individuals, such as the satisfaction of value expression or the anticipation of pride as opposed to guilt. With this in mind, we not only hypothesize that the reactions to moral and conventional norms will be different, we also hypothesize that the reaction will have differential dependence on internalization levels. So we predict that in moral domains, negative reactions to violations will be stronger for individuals who feel high intrinsic motivation because processing moral rules requires cognitive resources. And internalization affords less resource demanding processing. However, for conventional norms, negative reactions will be stronger for individuals who feel high extrinsic motivation because the logic of convention involves concerns about the community instead of the individual. We conducted 3 studies to test this hypothesis, but I will only present one of the 3 today. In this study, we invited undergrad students from Columbia to the lab. I recorded their heart rate reactivity when they observed different types of norm violations. Then they reported their cognitive and emotional responses. Specifically, I asked them how inappropriate norm violation was and how angry they were upon seeing the violation. In the end of the study, I measured the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation for them to stick to this norm themselves. Here are our norm violations. For moral violations, participants saw scenarios such as you see a friend cheat on the final exam in order to get a better grade. For conventional violation, participants saw scenarios such as one day you see your friend at the post office and she is painting a self-portrait. Here is how we measure internalization. Extrinsic motivation questions ask them how much abiding to a norm is a matter of maintaining society's respect. And intrinsic motivation questions ask how much is about a matter of living up to their own standards as well as expressing their inner values. Here are the results. As we can see from the bottom of the table, moral violations were seen as more inappropriate and wrong, and they elicit more anger but not necessarily more surprise. They led participants to be more likely to punish the violator and cut off their contact with the violator than conventional norms. We then examined our second hypothesis that the reactions to different domains depend on intrinsic or extrinsic motivations of adhering to the corresponding norms. Results suggest that the interaction between extrinsic motivation and the type of norm violation was significant on its appropriateness. As we can see from the graph, the extrinsic motivation predicted conventional violation, the judgment of inappropriate for conventional violation, but not for moral violations. And the opposite was true for intrinsic motivation. And there was a similar significant interaction between internalization and the type of norm violation on how angry participants felt. For physiological arousal, results showed a similar but stronger interaction between them. As we can see from the graph, greater extrinsic motivation predicted higher physiological arousal for conventional violations, but not for moral violations. However, the ratings on intrinsic motivation predicted higher physiological arousal only for moral violations, but not for conventional violation. So in conclusion, the results fully supported our hypothesis. We found moral violations elicited different cognitive, emotional, and behavioral patterns from conventional norms. And we also found intrinsic motivation predicted higher negative responses for moral violations, whereas extrinsic motivation predicted higher negative responses for conventional violations. This research has theoretical contribution to the field of motivation and organizational culture. It also has practical implication for leaders. Socialization theory has suggested that the more employees learn and internalize the values of organization, the higher commitment they will have. So leaders in organizations normally believe that employees should always be intrinsically motivated. However, the results from our study suggest that employees don't have to internalize all workplace norms in order to maintain the order in organizations. Leaders should be aware that internalization may not always be necessary to promote company norms because their job is only to enforce conventions, but not to enforce moral matters. That's all for today. Thank you so much.